Welcome to the webinar, Welfare Not Warfare, How Militarization is Destroying Our Societies, which is organized by the international network No to War, No to NATO. I'm Ludo de Brabander, spokesperson for Vrede, which is a Belgian peace organization, and I'm also a member of the International Coordination Committee of No to War, No to NATO, and I will be facilitating the discussion, while my colleague Michel Clément from International Peace Bureau will take care of the Zoom room and the technical part of this session. This webinar comes at a time of growing geopolitical tensions that seem to have intensified under Trump's aggressive foreign policy in the last months. Although tensions have also run high within NATO, the European allies appear to be taking a submissive stance towards Washington. Last year, Trump imposed, for example, a 5% standard for military expenditures on its European NATO allies, which will likely serve, of course, the interests of the US military industrial complex. But the rapid militarization of Europe is not entirely caused by NATO. Almost 1 year ago, the European Commission presented the Rearm Europe Readiness 2030 plan, according to which an additional 800 billion euro will be spent on the military, of which 150 billion euro will be made available under a new financial instrument, which is called SAFE, Security Action for Europe, to enhance their military capabilities via common procurement. And 650 billion will come from the member states themselves. They will be allowed to spend 1.5% of their GDP annually during 4 years, allowing them budgetary flexibility for military spending, while the European Commission insists on strict budgetary discipline for all other government expenditures. And this is, of course, very important in the discussion we will have today or tonight. While governments prioritize warfare, welfare systems are under threat. Increased military spending, partly driven by geopolitical shifts, competes with social spending, putting pressure on welfare budgets. And so in this webinar, we will discuss the societal costs of militarization. We also have, of course, a closer look to what is happening exactly on the front of militarization. And we will also take a closer look to possibilities and opportunities for a shift towards toward people-centered alternatives, common security, and social justice. And to this end, we are bringing in 3 eminent speakers. I will present them later, but each of the speakers will have about 10 minutes for their introduction. And during the introductions, we will keep the microphones muted. We will then address the questions you can submit in writing in the chat box, but you can also ask them directly. And to do so, please raise your hand using the digital hand icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We will first address then informative questions and then also address the comments. And of course, we will have discussions. Speakers can comment on each other during their interventions. The webinar is recorded and can be viewed online afterwards, via our channels. And if you do not want to be visible, of course, please turn off your video. So, as I said, I think it would be good to first have a kind of general view on the militarization with focus on Europe. I think Marc Botenga is well placed to do this. Marc Botenga is member of European Parliament for the Workers' Party from Belgium, the PTB, PVDA. But he's also a member of the Commission on Security and Defense. So, Marc, I first give you the floor to help us out in what is happening in Europe on the militarization front.
Thank you, Ludo, and thank you all for attending and the invitation. It's a pleasure, it's an honor to be here with you today, and in a very difficult situation. I am in the European Parliament for the moment, and it's a good place, I think, to feel the mood of militarization in Europe and the lack of discussion of democracy, transparency on what is ongoing. Now, obviously, as you know, and to get the framework, everything is being framed as we need to do this because we have the Russians that are how would I say, at our door that will soon be on the Grand Place, which is a wonderful square of Brussels. And if we don't rearm, if we don't buy all these weapons, produce all these weapons, we will be unable to defend ourselves. Now, this has been shown over and over again to be obviously false in the sense that we already spend a lot more money, and I'm sure my other colleagues will mention this as well, than Russia does, but also than most other countries in the world do, for that matter. We have, if you look at the numbers of fighter jets, if you look at the numbers of artillery, if you look at the numbers of battleships, we have a lot more. So if with all of that we would be unable to defend ourselves, then the problems lie elsewhere. Now, in reality, this militarization of the EU does not start at the moment Russia invades Ukraine in 2022. It is something that has a longer history. It has something, we had the European Defense Fund, we had the other defense industrial programs that were launched way before this. So there is something bigger behind it, let's put it that way. Even, to be honest, we could go back to the 50s because it's very often the European Union is touted as a peace process, but in reality, the European defense community is proposed already in the 50s. Is then blocked by resistance from France, a big mobilization at the time from the French Communist Party as well. But this idea at the time, where did it come from? It came from the fact that we were in a period of decolonization. We're in a period of national liberation struggles. And you could see the French, the British, also with the Suez crisis at the time, feeling that their power worldly, globally, was being diminished. And so they were like, we need to come together to make sure that we keep a hold on this world. And this philosophy is basically going to stay with the European Union, which was at the time a colonial power, to say, we need to stick together and be able to impose our will on the world. For a long time, this was done mainly through rules, through bigger companies, competition, imposing our rules on different countries. But now, in a changing world, the European Union thinks that it should also do so through arms. Let's be very, very clear about this. Obviously, to that, I'm not, Ludo referred to it, there's the US component and the NATO component. With the Trump norm saying, European countries should spend 5% of their GDP on military affairs. Completely arbitrary number. Already the concept of saying you should spend a determined percentage of your GDP of whatever you create in wealth to defense, to military affairs is completely arbitrary. Theoretically, you should look at, okay, what do we need to defend ourselves? What do we really need? What's lacking maybe? What do we have too much? And then on the basis of these needs analysis, you would start looking at, okay, then maybe we need to buy this and that. The fact of saying we need to spend 5% is a dogmatic approach that shows that there's something else behind it. How do we perceive that here? How does it go? You really see that there's a militarization in many countries and I'm sure Ulrike will mention this for Germany. Militarization of the minds, obviously, this putting the stress on, you need this survival package. We had a European commissioner saying, what is in my little survival package? How will I survive war? Not will there be a war? How are we going to avoid war? But, how am I going to survive the coming war? So this is really preparing people to say war is there. It's not like we're going to avoid it. It's really putting in people's head, watch it because the war is coming. So this is one part. There's also a much bigger material part. I saw someone already saying they were worried about hospitals or schools in the comments. It is very clear that there is a shift. The European Union, to many people in Europe, has become known over the last years as a union of austerity. Was a union that always said you need to cut back on social services, you need to cut back on social expenditure. Today, it says, well, it still says that, but it says you can increase military expenses. You do not have to respect all these rules about the deficit, about debt reduction for military expenses, right? So that is a big shift, and that is really what we call the militarization. Obviously, this has also a deregulation aspect. Maybe you've heard of it, all these omnibus packages. So what they're saying is that a number of rules that are supposed to protect health, that are supposed to protect the environment, on pollution, for example, will no longer apply or will be applied more flexibly for defense-related production. Now, defense-related production is more than just producing arms. It's a lot further. It's everything that can be used for defense. Now, this is also dual-use goods. So this is very, very broad because basically, a crayon theoretically could be used for defense in order to, if they want to interpret it very broadly. And obviously, this is also immediately attacking workers' rights. Very, very clearly, how do we see this? These different military programs ask workers to work longer shifts with less breaks. We have seen this in the European Defence Industrial Programme, the possibility to derogate from the Working Time Directive. Now, the European Working Time Directive, it's not a very ambitious directive. It puts the work week, the maximum work week at 48 hours, right? 48 hours is a very decent work week. Most European countries would have lower limits. Yet they say for defense production, workers need to work longer than this. Now, anyone working in a sector with explosives knows how dangerous and fatigue is, how dangerous these measures are. The same is true in the transport sector. This militarization is used to cut down on a number of EU rules that are, once again, already very flexible, very friendly for the business environment. But they say, the fact that truck drivers can take a break every 4.5 hours, that's maybe too, that limits too much what we can do militarily. So for military transport, rather than have them work 9 hours a day, we need to have them work and drive 11 hours a day. Rather than have them work 56 hours a week, we need to have them work 60 hours a week. So you can see that each one of these military packages has a frontal social attack to it. It's really, really important because they're hiding it. They don't speak about it, but you can see democratically, of course, there's the attack on the fact that everything now in parliament is an emergency resolution. There's never time to debate it. There's no democratic societal debate. It is imposed upon us. And mainstream parties go with it because it's, you guys wouldn't be against defending Europe, right? Would you? So I think this is a really, really important part of what is ongoing now and which we see in every part. We're also going to see it in the budget. We're going to see it in the future budget of the EU, where there's a big part that's going to go to defense, even openly and in a rather hidden way. So they're going to open a number of programs, so-called for dual use, and then basically shift the money from, I don't know, nature or environmental protection to defense related expenditure. Now, this is, as I said, related to a fundamental debate. This is related to the debate, what kind of society are we building? What is Europe and the union of European countries? What purpose does it serve? Does it serve the purpose of maintaining control over a big part of the world for EU multinationals? And do we need to militarize for this? As a French person said famously a century ago, you think you die for the nation, but in reality, you die for the interests of the industrials. That's the Europe they're constructing right now. And we need to be very clear about this. This is not a Europe of peace. This is not a Europe that respects rules. We've seen how they supported in Gaza the genocide. All violations of international law, if they are done by the US or Israel, we will not condemn them. Imagine if we are committing them. This is not a Europe anymore also that respects democracy. As I said, they're erasing democratic debate. This is really, it's really the basic principles that they've told us the EU is for that are being erased. And so we need to come with an alternative project. Of course, we need to oppose all of the things I just enumerated and listed. At the same time, we need to make clear that if we have a Europe that is at the service of big business, then we will be pushed into militarization and war. And so we need to break with this and really put on, a different, put on the agenda a different society. Say we need to break with this, or we need, we would say a socialist society, and each of us will have their society and their alternative principles. But this is going to be really of the essence in the coming, I would like to say years, but it's months, in order to avoid the war they want to put us in, and in order to avoid being a society that is basically Europe made in US imperialism. I'm going to stop there because I think I'm exactly at 10 minutes, Ludo, so I want to respect that.
Exactly. You had 10 minutes. Right. Very fine. Exactly.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Marc, for your knowledge to share it with us. And as you rightly pointed out, militarization goes together with fear, the politics of fear, let's say. There's a psychological part of it, the survival packets. And you need, of course, this fear for convincing people to spend their money on on the military. And this is, of course, what is happening now. Now, I would give the floor to Ulrike Eifler. She is a German trade union activist and part of the Nie wieder Krieg, die Waffen, nieder peace initiative. And I think she will talk a little bit about the situation in Germany and open it up to the general question of militarization and the social impact of it. Ulrike, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Ludo, and thank you so much for organizing this very important meeting. I'm absolutely convinced that that connecting peace issues with social questions and organizing the labor movement is the most important thing in the current situation we have to do. So that's why I'd like to give you firstly some information about destroying the welfare state in Germany, and secondly, I'd like to speak about militarization in general and what can we do against the current warmongering we are facing. So let me start with the first point. For the average person, militarization means giving more and more money to the army, and this destroys our society. And I have to say they are absolutely right with this impression. Every single euro spending for armament is missing for social justice, is missing for good education, for a good transport, health system, and even social ecological transformation. And we can see that exactly this currently happens in Germany. From 2029, the government is willing to implement the 5% target of the NATO, what in Germany means that they spend every second euro of the federal financial budget for military issues. And at the same time, they tell us we must work longer, we should be less sick, we are supposed to waive a good pension, and so on. And the elimination of public holidays, the restriction of continued wage payments in case of illness, and the abolition of the 8-hour day are publicity debated issues in the moment in Germany. So they want to return to the 70-hour work week. They want to rise the retirement age to 73 years. And they want people to pay upfront for doctor's visits and many, many, many other things. What we have to understand is that this doesn't happen by coincidence. It happens because the government is willing to spend more than 200 billion euros per year for military. 200 billion euros. It's a huge amount. The chief economist of Vrede, which is the public service union in Germany, his name is Dirk Hirschel, argues that the fund of public services will be largely depleted from 2027. And this completely will destroy our society, in my opinion. But what we have to understand is that, and this is my second point, that militarization means quite more than spending more and more money on armament. Marc already mentioned this. The so-called defense minister of Germany, Boris Pistorius, demands that Germany should become kriegstüchtig, what actually means that Germany should be made ready for war. So they say very clearly and very openly that they prepare the war. And therefore, we currently experience a complete militaristic penetration of the entire society. And that means that the government tries to introduce a militaristic logic into the society by military advertising, for example, on pizza boxes, at bus stops, in public swimming pools, and so on. But the real problem is that they prepare every single area of the society for war. Just to give you an example, the government published a so-called Green Book in which it played out the scenario of a war attack. And they argue that in the case of war, 1,000 injured soldiers per day would have to be expected in Germany. And that means that the military hospitals are not sufficient to care for such a large number of soldiers. And that's why they discuss how to play the healthcare system under the command of the military and how to ensure the priority medical treatment for soldiers compared to civilians. What we have to understand is that this will completely change the character of our health system, which currently helps us to stay or to become healthy. In case of war, our illness only matters if we are essential for war. And that's why in the Green Book, the government argues that the people must be prepared for significant restrictions in the civilian healthcare system. Similar effects exist also for postal delivery, for the public transport system, and even for education. Just to give you another example in regard to education, there are in some regions laws which requires teachers to invite soldiers into classes so that children can be prepared for military. And this is not voluntary, this is obliged. There's an obligation for the teachers. They have to invite the soldiers to their classes. They also discussed the introduction of a new subject, a school subject called Wehrkunde, what basically means military knowledge, let's say, probably to let our kids train shooting, as we can already see this in the Baltic states. And a few months ago, it was announced that a small town in the south of Germany organizes a holiday camp for the 6 to 12 years old kids together with German military. They also destroyed a society by attacking the fundamental democratic rights. Marc already mentioned also this. Students will be expelled from their schools if they speak out against conscription. Journalists are defamed when they take a position different from what the federal government says, and there are new emergency legislations which prohibits the right to strike in a state of tension. And I'm absolutely convinced that the new world order created by the US invasion in Venezuela won't reduce the state of lawlessness and violence only on the level of international relationships, but also have an impact to the domestic situation in our countries. Furthermore, our governments tell us a lot of lies about planned attack by Russia, possible in 2 or 3 years. And this threat lies are also a part of militarization. Why? Because they are an attempt to turn the people who actually don't want to have anything to do with warmongers into allies. And they need the people as allies. This is very clear because if people strike against social cuts, for example, the government cannot wage war. And that's why they say, we cut your pensions, we let you work longer, but we do this in your interest. We do this for your security because we want to be well prepared if Russia attacks the NATO. And surveys show that they are successful with this threat lies. Surveys show that the fear of a Russian war has increased in Germany. So the most important question is, how can we disrupt the war machine, and how can we deal with these issues? And in my opinion, 3 things are really crucial. The first thing is see the contradictions of the ruling class. So they need our agreement to a policy that makes us poorer and only offers insecurity. Socialists must these contradictions make visible. It is really, really important. The second thing is we must be aware of our history and the strength of our class. So the First World War was stopped by the European working class. And this is the reason why the ruling class sought an alliance with fascist forces in order to crush the workers' movement before they started the Second World War. They wanted undisturbed to make their profits by war waging. And that's why we have to be anchored in working class organizations, especially in the unions, and be visible as the strongest opponents of war. And the third thing is, and this is my last thought, we should be aware that we are probably on the eve of a new Great War, because capitalism is in a deep and in an existential crisis. So, and this is a very serious thing, because this crisis is that deep that there is probably no crisis solution within the system. And that's why we have to connect our activities against war with a socialist perspective. Marc already mentioned this, because this gives the people hope, and only this gives the people hope in this situation. What we have to understand is that war is an intensified class attack that must be fought back as a class attack. And Rosa Luxemburg said more than 100 years ago, socialism or barbarism. And if we look today to the horror of Gaza, we must recognize Rosa Luxemburg was absolutely right. The ruling class leads us in a barbaric world with authoritarianism, war, and violence. And the contradictions of our times push for solutions which are outside outside our system. And this is associated with big dangers, big dangers, but also with lots of opportunities in the class struggle. And I think we must seize these opportunities and discuss proud and self-confident about socialism as a solution of the crisis.
Thank you, Ulrike. Well, you're all very disciplined, and you also took even less than 10 minutes. Thank you very much for sharing us your views on what is happening in Germany with a lot of references to the history. I remember also that workers, I think it was Jean Jaurès who said in France, don't fight workers for the interests of the ruling class. I think it was, there are many of these kind of expressions coming from the First World War, and which is also frightening. You didn't mention it, but I think it's important that Friedrich Merz, I think last May, just said openly that Germany should have the strongest army of Europe. With the history of Germany, this is a very strange, let's say, strange way of addressing the militarization of Germany, without thinking about the very sensitive past, especially if you talk about possible war with Russia. So thank you, Ulrike. And you also mentioned at the end some 3 important points, I think, which we can maybe also address in the discussions later. So, and our last speaker is Alex Gordon. Alex Gordon is from the UK. He is vice president for the campaign on nuclear disarmament and former president of the, when I'm not mistaken, the National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers. Is it right, Alex? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
The RMT, which is the largest trade union covering transport. And he is also co-author of a brochure which is called Alternative Defense. I show it to you. And so, Alex, I think you will also talk about, since the UK is not anymore member of the European Union, but I guess as a member of NATO, you face the same issues on militarization. And thank you for the comments in the chat box. We will come back to them later, and the questions you have asked there or raised there. Alex, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Ludo, and thanks to the 2 great speakers that we've just heard. And I'm not sure I can be as disciplined. I'll try. Want to congratulate CND and the No to War, No to NATO network on this great initiative to bring anti-militarists from different countries together to discuss this international question, the vital question of peace and the preparations for war that threaten all human life on this planet. In May last year, 2025, I was one of the co-authors of the Alternative Defense Review, which you just showed, which was published by the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament and is available on our website. I've put the link in the chat for anyone who's interested to download it. The Alternative Defense Review was an initiative that originated by trade union, which you mentioned, the RMT, which in 2024 called for a campaign of trade unions and peace organizations to convene a labor and peace movement summit to work out the basis of a new foreign policy with the promotion of peace and social justice at its heart. And the Alternative Defense Review is intended as a contribution towards that. The need for this initiative from trade unionists was very clear. In 2022, the British Trade Union Congress adopted a guns and butter policy that called for UK governments to provide a 30-year guaranteed pipeline of submarine and shipbuilding military contracts. In 2022, unions representing manufacturing workers, a small minority of whom work in the supply chain of the highly profitable UK and US arms firms, lobbied successfully for a military spending boost as part of a shift to the right in the wider British Labour movement, following Jeremy Corbyn's replacement as Labour Party leader by Keir Starmer in 2021. That 2022 Trade Union Congress vote took place at the absolute height of the largest strike wave in Britain for 34 years, with rail, metro, bus, postal, telecoms, dock workers, nurses, doctors, civil servants, teachers, and many, many other workers protesting at the cost of living crisis and taking strike action for against wage cuts and attacks on their jobs and conditions. And in 2022, while more workers took strike action than at any time for 35 years in Britain, leaders of some of Britain's largest unions, instead of coordinating a united front against a failing Conservative government at that time, instead of doing that, they argued that public services could be funded from a defence spending stimulus. And they welcomed the 2021 AUKUS Pact, Australia, UK, United States is the acronym AUKUS, which was a massive program to design, build and deploy nuclear submarines to Australia. And a fierce argument erupted amongst trade unionists in Britain since the 2022 policy was adopted. And in the context of a deteriorating international situation with ongoing wars in Ukraine, Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and since 2023, the genocidal onslaught by Israel, armed and supported by the US, UK, France, and Germany against the Palestinians, a formal policy that argued for more military spending on the supposed grounds that it had a beneficial domestic social effect, became untenable. And our alternative defence review fed into this sharp debate amongst trade unionists between those who argued for more military spending and those of us calling for a paradigm shift towards a peace policy. And we called for a shift towards significantly demilitarized defence strategy rooted in human security and common security, prioritizing diplomacy, global cooperation, conflict prevention, and investment in health, education, climate resilience, social care, and the creation of well-paid, secure, unionized, and socially useful jobs. And we advocated for a significant reduction in military spending, an immediate halt to arms exports to countries involved in active conflict or human rights abuses, including Israel and the Gulf states, and a just transition for defence-dependent workers and their communities. So in September last year, 3 years after this debate started, delegates at the same Congress of the British TUC meeting in Brighton voted by 2.8 million to 2.2 million to end support for increased arms spending by supporting a motion from the University and College Lecturers Union calling for wages, not weapons. And the arguments that we have set out in the Alternative Defence Review have certainly penetrated into the heart of the trade union movement in Britain, so that the simplistic military Keynesian fallacy that the politicians have been repeating have been overcome within our movement for the moment. In the Alternative Defence Review, we've identified how a particular war narrative was developed over the previous decade in the United States, the UK, and increasingly across NATO members in Europe also. And we explained how this narrative provided the basis for policies that brought the world close to nuclear disaster. In 2021, the British Prime Minister at the time, Boris Johnson, launched an integrated defence review and identified China and Russia as military aggressors, and in China's case also as an economic challenger, which is actually a complete joke because China's not an economic challenger to Britain. China is an example that Britain is lamentably failing to follow. And as such, the 2021 review marked a key turning point in British state policy. And it is this narrative that's then been dominant across most NATO powers in Europe and largely accepted on a cross-party basis in Britain. It provides justification for a scale of military expenditure not seen for a generation, and for policies of confrontation in Europe that have recently come near to triggering a nuclear war, as I mentioned. As in 2001, the origins of these policies, when we went into an illegal war, or we were being prepared to go into an illegal war in Iraq, the origins of these policy assumptions lie within the United States military-industrial complex and its public proponents, in particular Robert Kagan, the co-founder of the Project for the New American Century, which laid the groundwork for the invasion of Iraq, and who is a member of the US State Department Policy Board until 2024. He's also the partner of Victoria Nuland, who was the Biden's Deputy Secretary of State and one of the foremost advocates for military intervention to forestall the rise of China. So the UK government's adoption of this policy turn was closely associated with Boris Johnson and with a militarist wing within his party, the Conservative Party. It was also powerfully backed by the UK's own military-industrial complex, led by BAE Systems, British Aerospace, which is a joint British-US company. And it's important to stress that the UK's arms companies are not self-standing or independent. The dominant shareholders in BAE Systems are US investment companies, Rolls-Royce and Babcock, two other very large arms companies in Britain, although smaller than BAE Systems, that also have dominant US shareholders alongside British investment banks. Moreover, the UK's nuclear weapons arsenal, which successive governments, British governments, have described as independent, is not independent at all. It is in reality dependent on the United States for warhead design and manufacture, while Trident missiles themselves, the nuclear missiles, are leased by the UK from the United States. The United Kingdom's nuclear dependency on the United States is enshrined in a secretive mutual defence agreement that hasn't been subject to any parliamentary debate since it was first signed in 1958. So Boris Johnson's rebadging of a new regional defence, of new regional defence contracts paralleled or reflected in many ways what the Biden administration was doing in the United States at that time, linking rearmament to economic growth. So despite the enthusiasm of generals, arms dealers and politicians for cuts to our welfare state, I think it's important to say that no European government has yet succeeded in the wholesale switch of public spending from welfare to warfare. They're trying, but they're not there yet. I think I'm on 10 minutes, so I'm going to wind up there without concluding my points, because I don't want to outstay my welcome, Ludo. I hope that's okay. I can come back if there's any questions.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you also for addressing the discussion among trade unions. And I think it's a general phenomenon in all countries that many seem to still stick to the idea of military Keynesianism and the opportunities of working of a growing military industry, opposed to those who think that is nonsense and that the money better is invested in other sectors which are more giving more gains in sense of win in economical and social wins. Thank you, Alex. I'm sure we come back to that. So there are many questions already. Some of them are similar or just comments. There was one comment, it started with the housing crisis, although it's not directly connected that question to the question of militarization. It's more about the way the money is spent and economics are working. And what is the question? What was it again here? I'm looking for it. They seem so money-oriented, they don't care about other parts of humanity. What can be done? I don't know if somebody can say some words about it. There is a housing crisis, I think, in all our countries. Well, I think it's the same impact we have everywhere of divesting in social spending, but maybe you have something particular to say about it. I look to you three, so.
I think that we may have frozen. I'm not sure if it's just me, but I can't see.
No, you're not frozen,
Okay.
Alex. But maybe it seems to work,
Okay.
at least, yeah. Somebody wants to address it, or we just can skip that because it's not.
No, I'll address it because I think it's an important question, but we all touched upon it. And there's a housing crisis, there's a crisis in healthcare, there's a crisis in many sectors in Europe, many social sectors. And this is an orchestrated crisis. It is not a fatality. It's not something that, had to happen or whatever. It's an orchestrated crisis, which is a choice to leave it on the one hand to the market and to put public money, either to reduce public spending as such, so we don't have to, I don't know, tax the millionaires or whatever. But on the other hand, to leave it to the market and to give the housing market, which then becomes a market, to big investment funds as well. I think this is also something we see in many countries in Europe, rather than say, we see some good examples elsewhere in Europe. I don't know, Vienna has a good reputation on this with historically with social and public housing. So I absolutely agree, and I think it's one of the ways that we can put this on the agenda to show, guys, these are choices that are being made. And they speak about your security, but your security will be not be able to have a decent home, not to be able to live in a flat you can afford. So I think this contradiction is also very important. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marc. There's another question. It's quite particular, but it's about the US bases in Britain, if they will be used for by the US against Greenland. Of course, this is addressing what is currently going on. But maybe in general, we can talk about this, division between NATO partners, US on the one hand, and most of other NATO parties on Greenland, but on many topics. What will be the consequence of, for example, on European security of that? Because many say because of the divestment by because we have this opposition with the United States, we need to be ready to be able to address our own security without the support of the United States. This is often used as an argument for militarization. Maybe from Greenland to this general question. Ulrike, you want to say something about it?
Yeah, okay, I can say something about it. As you maybe know, we have the problem of the Mittelstreckenraketen, the missiles of the US that should come to Germany in this year, in 2026. And I think the attack of the USA to Venezuela shows that we can't give the USA, and especially not Trump, the opportunity or the capacity to attack Russia from Germany in less than 10 minutes. And this is the capacity of these missiles. And I think this is a big danger, big escalation potential lies in this missiles, and that's why I would say so. We have to be organize the protest against these missiles and against the influence of the USA to Europe, but we have to be careful at the same time that we not copy the political style of the Greens that say, oh, we have to enlarge Europe, we have to militarize Europe, because Europe has to play an own role in the geopolitical conflict of our times.
Okay, thank you. To talk.
Can I just add to
Yep.
that? I mean, I think we've just seen that there's a wing of the British military and military intelligence who have been perhaps the most bellicose elements within NATO. We saw last week the attack on the tanker Bella 1 off the coast of Scotland, which was launched by US Special Forces from British civilian airbase in the north of Scotland. And there are F-35B bombers from the United States being brought in to this country specifically in order to be able to strike Iran. So we're under no illusions whatsoever that Trump's war drive, Trump's determination, whether it's to next attack Venezuela, whether it's to next attack Iran, or whether it's, as in 2025, to continue bombing Yemen and Gaza, in fact, depends to a great extent on the ability to use British air bases, both in this country and also in Cyprus at RAF Akrotiri, the British airbase on Cyprus used for sending spy planes over Gaza to collect intelligence for the Israeli armed forces. So Britain is absolutely at the heart of Trump's war plans. I mean, I doubt very much that he's going to invade Greenland from Britain. It seems to me it'd be a lot quicker to do it from New York or somewhere closer. But the truth is that the tiny island that we live on, I mean, Ulrike has talked about and written about previously the peril that the German population is put in by the proposals from German politicians to host long-range missiles that can strike into Russia. And the same is absolutely true of Britain. On a tiny island, densely populated, it would take a small number of direct hits from nuclear weapons to completely devastate the entire population. And we are being placed in peril by NATO and by our own politicians. And this is becoming, I think, a much more widely understood reality now. I came into the peace movement back in the early 1980s when we were campaigning against the deployment of US cruise missiles in Britain. And that was a formative political experience for people of my generation. I think we need to find the language and the connection with young people today who are protesting against conscription in Germany, who are worried about the fear of world war, of US instigated military operations around the world, and we need to bring them into the peace movement. We really do need to rejuvenate the peace movement, and I think we can do it. There is an awareness now that we're in the firing line, not just people in other countries, but the crosshairs are on us.
Thank you, Alex. I will come back to Agneta and others that raised their hands, but maybe first, there are many questions in the chat box still left. This one I will read from Guido van Imput, who is from the Netherlands. A question for Marc. And he says, you say that there is a great urgency, not years but months, to press an alternative for war. What would be your priority list to have some impact to reach that alternative, or perhaps at least to prevent war, or a next step in militarization? Can you clarify that, Marc?
Well, if Christmas is over, so I don't know if it's the time for a wish list, but I think some elements have been mentioned. I think first of all, really clarify the matter of the social impact. I think this is absolutely necessary because it is something that spontaneously says, "Hey ho, I don't want that." Even people that when you discuss with them and they're like, "Yeah, but maybe we need to get more money for the army, or we need to," by the moment you say, they're gonna take your pension away, there's this thing, oh wait, no, that is not, because that basically the security of your living conditions is being attacked in the name of security. So I think that is a really important part. Alex made a few points, I think, on military Keynesianism. I think that's also important because it is absolute propaganda. We know that it's not a solution. We know that it will not save the industry. There's all kinds of studies on this, even from very mainstream think tanks. It's not even something that you need to look very much to the left for. So I think that's an important thing. And thirdly, we need to show that there's another way of doing foreign policy and international relations. Aside from what I said about a different society, right now, right here, there is different ways. Diplomacy works, can work, and will work. And we refuse a world of eternal war, because that is where we're going now. I think it was Ulrike saying we're going to a big explosion with the structural crisis of capitalism. And we see Greenland, but you see Venezuela, you see, I think many people are seeing things in the world they would not have imagined. They are threatening right now Iran with destruction. So you're seeing things in the world, and everyone sees them on their screen, which, yeah, I mean, make you scared on the one hand, but not necessarily only scared of they're going to attack us, also scared for the kind of world they're building. Is this the world you want to see your children grow up in? Is that the world you want to, because we're all still relatively young, the ones of us speaking, is this the world we want to grow old in? And the answer is no. And I think we have a really a fundamental debate there on the kind of society we're constructing, we're building, and the alternatives that exist. Because eyes are opening. This is maybe the only advantage that we have with Donald Trump, who's very open about, I want the oil, I want this, I want that. So these would be like my 3 or 4 points. Thanks.
Thank you, Marc. Maybe before I come back to first intervention by oral speaking, Agneta, one more question here by Jackie Burke, or Burke, I don't know how to pronounce it, who would like to know more about what European civil society and trade unions are doing to mobilize support against militarism. So I think Alex already discussed that. Maybe, I don't know if you have some additional remarks to that, Ulrike or Marc. I just can tell you that there are many networks established also, new networks like the Rearm or Stop Rearm Europe network, which is also convening quite regularly. I think next week, for example, which is open to everyone. You can also go to the website. And I think there was also Michel also posted the link to the Manifesto No to Global NATO, Yes to Common Security. As you know, the next NATO summit will be in Ankara, and usually we prepare counter summits. I don't know if this will be possible now, especially in Turkey, but there are ideas now, at least in the weeks before, ahead of that summit, to have, at least in Europe, a big European demonstration, probably in Brussels. But that is something that will be discussed in the Stop Rearm Europe network. Good, Agneta, you're already waiting a long time, so I give you the floor to ask your question. Please try to be brief. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm very listening carefully to what you are saying, but I have to add something. I come from the peaceful, wonderful Sweden, and every time I go abroad, I say, I'm from Sweden. Oh, Sweden! I say, forget it. Forget it. To the contrary of what you are talking about, the US has now 17 military bases in our country. 17. they are allowed to bomb Russia in 5 minutes. We have installations, S-range, with the world's biggest downloading station from satellite in the north of Sweden. No war is fought without space installations. You have to add space, because Trump has really revealed, because he is a little bit stupid, he's bragging about it, because the others, they have been rather silent, because they are really not caring about paros. What is paros? What is paros? It's a UN agreement against using space for military use. Prevention of arms race in outer space. That is only Israel and the United States who say, we don't want to confirm this, because every second year they lift this question up in the United Nations, and those who don't care at all, and don't, it's the United States of America and Israel. So Israel has been training in the north of Sweden. What is in the north of Sweden? It's Europe's biggest training area for space weapons in the north of Sweden. The wonderful, neutral, lovely Sweden has turned into a platform. I have written about it. The North, a platform for warfare towards Russia. That has been very silently, and because I can hear we are not there, we are not mentioned, but it is the center. I don't say that those nuclear weapons in the Netherlands and in Belgium and in Italy and in Germany, they are horrifying, but the launching pad and the training area, because they said it's so crowded in Germany. It's such a small country. You can't train everything. So they came up to the north 20 years ago.
Agneta, I want to
Thank you very much.
Yeah, try to be brief, or if you have a question. No, it was a comment. Okay, thank you. So I would like to give the floor to, I don't know if somebody wants to add something. I think it was rather a comment by Agneta. Else I will give the floor to Donald Smith. You have a question?
Yes. I wrote it in chat, but I will say it by voice. I'm really shocked that the EU leaders are so naive to be duped by the US. Jeffrey Sachs says it well, but others have said it, that the US engineered, as Chaz Friedman said, the US engineered the 2014 coup. He and Jack Matlock and other diplomats said that the U.S. was involved in arming, Nazi militias, and basically the U.S. lied about the war being unprovoked. It was definitely provoked by the U.S. and they're doing it to weaken Russia, to wean Europe from Russian energy, and to enrich the arms manufacturers. So my question is, why on earth don't EU leaders realize this? It's so blindingly obvious, as Noam Chomsky said. It's blindingly obvious that the U.S. is lying about this, the U.S. shares responsibility. I don't like Putin, but the U.S. is also guilty in this war. That's my point.
Okay, thank you, Donald. I think the US is lying on many more things. But maybe somebody, Marc, or I don't know where Alex is gone, or yeah. Marc or Ulrike, do you want to answer that?
Well, I don't think it's just naivety. I think there's different tendencies within the EU. One of them is obviously a number of leaders and political tendencies that have grown up or have been grown up by the United States establishment, and that consider that submission to the United States is the future of Europe. that really have been like the Europe as a proxy of the US. There's another part of them that think that, that do think in terms of an autonomous EU imperialism. But that still consider that, that this can grow under the NATO umbrella. You have this thing very often where they then say, we need an EU pillar within NATO. Now, this is very often, this has this tendency of these people saying, we want to build an EU imperialism. And I think some of the EU military programs today go in that direction when they have minimum percentages of weapons or technologies made in Europe. You can see also that some countries have been shifting investment a little bit more towards EU production. So there is this idea. Ukraine would play a part in this. So the idea of having Ukraine then as a testing ground for weapons, the idea of having production also in Ukraine, of benefiting from the weapons that are being used or tested in Ukraine. So this plays a part. So you also have this tendency. And both obviously will not, go frontally against the US. Using different kinds of excuses and refute. This might be tested a little bit on Greenland, but I'm afraid many people within the EU establishment, even the European establishment, think that there's some kind of deal that can be made with Trump. And it's very disheartening to see that people go there and negotiate. What kind of access, how can we sell out, and so on. Which is obviously, I always take the example of imagine the president of, I don't know, Zimbabwe, to take a random country that has nothing to do with it, coming to us and say, I would like Greece. Putin coming to say, I would like Finland. It is absolutely impossible to imagine any EU leader or head of state then going to Moscow or going to Zimbabwe to say, yes, let's negotiate. Let's see if we sell it to you, or let's see if that's absolutely, and so that gives you the absurdity of it and the degree of submission to US imperialism right now.
Thank you, Marc. Somebody else wants to discuss that? Else I will give the floor to Almut Roshawansky.
Hi, thanks for giving, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So first of all, I want to say thank you to everybody, to all the speakers, to Ulrike, to Marc, to Alex. Marc, Ulrike, I follow your work all the time, and it's so important to see what you're doing. Alex, I've been involved with CND actually in Scotland, and again, like if it wasn't for you, I would be despairing here. But I do want to say there's less than 100 people in our conversation here today, and across Europe, there are very few of us, and we're splintered, we're not connected. And if you look at the space that we have in our political institutions, be it the European Parliament or our national parliaments, it's very minimal. And I think especially the European Parliament is a space where you can see that the vast majority from the far right across the center all the way to the left is pro-militarism, is pro-war, correct? And so my question to you is like, how do you see us scaling up? How do we take our small networks and the occasional, very impressive mobilizations like the school strike in Germany, right? Or like those actually very large strikes early in fall in Italy, the like pretty much getting close to a general strike. How do we scale it up? How do we make it permanent, more sustained? And how do we actually sway the political middle? Because we obviously cannot wait until we, have won, a majority in parliament, which is not going to happen anytime soon. What are your strategies and what can all of us do? Thank you.
Thank you, Almut. Very relevant question. How to scale up, how to reinforce ourselves in our opposition to militarism. I don't know if Alex, for example, wants to answer that.
Yeah, I'm not sure which country you're speaking from, Almut. So I'm not entirely sure what the context of the movement that you're part of. Which country are you speaking from?
Well, I now live in Bulgaria, but I am a member of WILP in Austria, and I've worked with peace organizations in Germany, Austria, and the UK and elsewhere.
Okay. So, I mean, it's a very important question how we make a mass movement, how we turn the peace movement into a mass movement. I want to make a couple of points. One is that as I remarked very briefly in my first opening contribution, I don't think there's a national government anywhere in Europe that has succeeded in completely winning a warfare state. They're pushing hard, but the implications of what they're saying is so horrific that it will create the basis for mass movements of opposition. And we have to think very carefully about how we engage with them, how we articulate our arguments. There's going to be an important, well, there was an international anti-war meeting in Paris in October last year, and there's going to be a further international anti-war meeting in London in June of this year, on Saturday, the 20th of June. There'll be information available from CND and other peace organizations about that in the next few weeks. But I think we would like to make the trade union movement really core and central to the questions of peace now, because firstly because in Germany, Britain, and France, there is a huge economic crisis taking place of deindustrialization. I mean, in Britain, it started in the 1980s under Margaret Thatcher, when we lost huge amounts of our manufacturing industry. In Germany, it's taking place now in a very brutal and concentrated way. And so the people who are being dispossessed of jobs and viable economic futures in communities need to be engaged with. And we can do that through the trade union movement if we can win those arguments in the trade unions. And it's different in different countries. There are different structures, different ways of doing that. But we need to bring the millions of workers and retired people and apprentices and young people who are looking for work into this discussion, because the militarists are predicating their attempt to popularize rearmament on the basis that it will provide economic stability and future jobs. And that is just a fundamental fallacy and a myth. So we must challenge that, and we've got to get a strong component in Britain, Germany, Sweden, France, of trade unionists who are prepared to stand up to politicians and say, bullshit, this doesn't work, it's not true, you're not creating the kind of society that our movement founded 100 years ago. So I think, we can do this, but we've got to work with each other. We've got to, I think, some of the publications that I've read from the German anti-war movement, which Ulrike has sent me, are extremely impressive. That sort of information needs to be translated into different languages. We need to communicate much better with each other. And we do have the technology to do that now. For example, this webinar this evening. So I think this should be seen as a start, not... I wouldn't see this as a negative that there are less than 100 people here tonight. This is the start of a conversation, bringing people together, and we've got the best arguments, and we can win this.
Yeah. Thank
Can
you.
I add something, Ludo?
Yes, Ulrike.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think that's a really important question that I would rise up, and I think so. I absolutely agree to everything what Alex mentioned, and I also I think Almut has absolutely right if she say we couldn't wait if we have the majority in the parliament, because I think having left majorities in the parliament is just an expression about having the majority outside the parliament. But the question is, how is the way to come to these majorities? And I think we have to be aware of the contradictions. Militarization and authoritarianism is not a way or a politics without any contradictions. They rise up a lot of contradictions. So if they finance their armament politics, they have to practice social cuts. And this is a big contradiction for the population, for the people, for our colleagues, for our comrades, because it's a politics that make worse the working and living conditions of the people. And we have to work with the contradictions. And also in regard to the young people in Germany, the students who stroke last December. They stroke because they have fear to be sent to war. More than 80% young people refuse going to military. This is a big contradiction, and we have to deal with this and have to use it to build up a big movement. And if I look back to the 80s, where we had in Germany a really big peace movement, then can say this was not a big movement from the beginning. It was very small in the beginning, and it is like Alex say, we are at the beginning, and we have to start, and we have to deal with the contradictions, and we have to organize. And I think the key to grow up as movement is to organize or to politicize the discussions within the labor movement, politicize the discussions in the trade union movement, because in Germany we have a trade union movement. This is that deals with a lot of trouble of deindustrialization, and the view is not really clear, because they have to deal with big problems of more than 100,000 losing jobs alone in the last year. And we have to clarify these problems and have to say, okay, the problem of deindustrialization has to do with a geopolitical crisis that belongs together, and also with social cuts that belongs together. And we have to build a movement that keep in mind all these problems and fight against this together. Yeah.
Thank you, Ulrike, and thank you, Alex. I think it's very important, this discussion, and I hope we will have more of these kind of discussions from the viewpoints of the trade unions and connected them to the peace issues. I also refer to what is happening in Italy. I mean, in Italy, you had successful last year mobilizations, and those were essentially led by the trade unions, Segil and others that were able. They picked up the issue of peace and connected it to the labor movement, and so this is something. So these exchanges are very important to learn from each other, I think. Maybe to continue on that, Alex, because there is a question, and I come back to Leo. But first, there's a question for Alex. How has the alternative defense review been received? It was brilliantly timed to the strategic defense review and got some attention in the media. Are you working with parliamentarians? So this is another dimension. You know, we talk about trade unions and peace, but how is it received by the parliamentarians, the political world, let's say?
Well, very, very quietly. We had a parliamentary launch of the Alternative Defence Review, which was hosted by Jeremy Corbyn, who's a former leader of the Labour Party in Britain and independent member of Parliament, and a great peace campaigner and a member of CND. So he hosted a parliamentary launch, but we've had very little engagement from any of the political parties in Westminster, in the Westminster Parliament. That's not to say that they're not aware of the discussions about that we're putting forward. This is a really very live debate in Britain at the moment, and you can see, well, the poll ratings for our Prime Minister and our ruling party are almost as bad as the poll ratings for President Macron in France and Chancellor Merz in Germany. They're incredibly unpopular, and what this indicates is the chasm, the huge chasm that exists between what the people want, what ordinary people believe and hope for and aspire to, and what the politicians are offering them. And while I appreciate Almut's earlier comments about the need to win over the middle, the fact is the politicians that we haven't won over the middle. They're sitting on top of a political system that is rigged in most countries to ensure continuity of ideology, continuity of politics, whichever party is in power. We've seen a massive decline in membership of mass political parties. I mean, compared to 20, 30, 40 years ago, political parties in Britain, and also I know in many other countries in Europe, are tiny in terms of membership. So there's this crisis of mass politics. And as somebody said, I think it was Ulrike said, the movement outside Parliament is where we're going to win this. And there is already this huge democratic deficit in all European countries. I don't even want to talk about the European Union, which, forgive me, Marc, is the most anti-democratic institution that one could imagine. It's actually sort of repels democracy in almost every sense. But so there's this big democratic deficit in our societies, and the peace movement has to be on the side of the people who aren't falling for this bullshit. There's a couple of other things I could say, but I'll wait for other people to come in.
Thank you, Alex. Time is running out, and there are so many questions. We cannot all address them, I think. But Leo, maybe you can first intervene with what you want to ask or say. I think it's about the social forum. You have to unmute yourself, Leo. On the left, the far left, there is a button to unmute you. If not, I will first give the floor to Tom Cuthbert, and then you can try to unmute yourself in between.
Okay. Do you agree that there has been a lot of noise about Trump's impeachment in America? For example, federal judge Tanya Chutkin has submitted a 47-page report to the Department of Justice for 14 breaches by Trump. There are questions about the War Powers Act and Congress. Will they get rid of Trump, and will we be any better off if they do? That's the question.
Okay, I'm not sure that any of you are able to answer that, because that's quite particular, but I think there are many reasons to impeach Trump. The question is if he let impeach himself. That's another question. Is anyone able to answer that?
Maybe I'll just do it. I got no clue, obviously, about the U.S. policy, but what I do think is that what's going to be determinant there is what I think Ulrike and Alex also said. It's the pressure the social movement will be able to articulate on Trump. I think there have been impressive mobilizations in the US as well, and that kind of goes back to what Almut was asking earlier. I think we should not, there's a tendency sometimes to underestimate ourselves, and obviously the ones in charge do everything they can to encourage that, to make us feel weak, to make us feel divided, to make us feel marginalized, and so on. But if you look at a very recent history, for example, what happened in Palestine and the amazing mobilizations, not just in Europe, but also in the US, and the shift in awareness that has brought about for many young people, we speak about Generation Gaza and so on. The actions you see against ICE, and obviously I'm not there, so it's difficult for me to judge and assess exactly how widespread they are, but they show that resistance is there. The No Kings Day and so on and so on. So there's a lot of mobilization also in the US. And I think we should not underestimate the power of that, because this is also why the repression is so strong. Obviously, I mean, there's a strong repression, criminalization, and so on, but that is because the others also see the potential of these social movements, and they see how this can spread. They see also the criminalization of the Palestinian solidarity movement in many European countries has to do with this, because they see the power that comes out of these mobilizations, and that is not just about Palestine. It is about much more.
Okay, thank you, Marc. Meanwhile, Leo was able to unmute himself. So, Leo,
yes,
please.
Don't know what happened. I'm Leo Gabriel from Austria, and I'm talking to you on behalf of the Assembly of the World Social Forum, where we had a meeting, and we came to a decision to promote something which here is very, very well seen, I hope, that given the fact that all the supranational organizations like the EU and the United Nations are blocked in one way or another, we want to get to a mobilization similar to 2003, the 15th of February, against the war in Iraq, under the call of welfare and not warfare for the 1st of May, because we think, and we are getting in touch with trade unions everywhere. There are a number of trade unions in France, in Italy already, but also in several countries of Latin America we have contacted. And so I hope you could join this endeavor, which is an ongoing process, so that this 1st of May gets exactly to the point you were speaking about. At the time, those who were very active were the British, for instance, in 2003. Nowadays, I would like you also to help us in order to get this mobilization going, and with whatever contacts you have. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, Leo. I think we are almost, it's time to finish, but there is one more question, Grace Sutton, and then I think it is one that I would like to pick up from the chat box, and then I think I'm afraid we cannot address what is left, but Gray, please try to be brief. We have 4 minutes left.
Is it possible to tie up a lot of what we've been said by designing a direct attack on the, I believe, very deeply embedded assumption in society that security comes from military power? There's a lot of history that affirms that, but it is deeply fallacious, and there's so much of what we're saying has epitomized this, and there's so many of our threats on society that got nothing to do with military power. In fact, it's got much more to do with international cooperation. So our biggest threat is a loss of international cooperation.
Thank you, Gray. I'm afraid this will take a lot of time to answer that, but you're right, of course. And I think Marc already mentioned it also, the idea of common security, for example, and I would say also human security, both system of securities that address the real security issues and arms not. But maybe some, I don't know, Marc or Ulrike or Alex, you would like to say a word on that? Well, it's, yeah.
I think it's a good point, but we have 1 minute left, I think. So I don't want to, but thank you for bringing it to the table. I think it's important that it was mentioned. I think that's really.
And so maybe a last thing, maybe we can address that briefly, but I think it's important because it's a European-wide phenomenon. It's coming from Ivana Balen about the extreme right wing, and how they're exploiting the social issues or manipulating it, while many formerly left parties are turning militarist. So, do you have good tips for us how to address this? Yeah? And it's true. I think the right wing is playing on that social issues and that discontent among the people, and at the same time, many left-wing parties, so-called left-wing parties, are turning to the militarist side, let's say, and in that way supporting the divestment from the social. Ulrike, I think it's something for you now, because it's something you have also in Germany, this problem. Yeah.
What I can say to this issue is that both militarism and also the fascist rising is a result of the capitalist crisis. And we have to understand this. And Jeremy Corbyn, we invited Jeremy Corbyn to Germany to a big trade union conference for peace 2 years ago. And Jeremy told us, speak about socialism. Speak about socialism in the context of the crisis of capitalism, because this gives the people hope. And this makes the difference between us and the far right, because they want to destroy the societies in the interest of the ruling class. And we have to speak about socialism. We have to speak about a society where we can live free and together one time together without all these terrible contradictions of capitalism. This is maybe an abstract answer to the question, but I think it is a very important answer to this question.
Yeah, thank you, Ulrike. It's also a very complicated question. I mean, it has many tangles and things that should be addressed, but it's important. It's an important issue, I think, and it's very important for the left wing to discuss that and to find answers to that. I think rightly said by I forgot her name from the Netherlands. Anyway, I think Agneta, unfortunately, we have to stop. It's 8:30 and in Central European time. So I think we have 1.5 hours now, and people are leaving. So it's time to end this very interesting and important issue, militarization versus social impact of it. And I thank you, Ulrike, Alex, and Marc, for sharing your knowledge about that and give ideas to all of us that we take with us. I can only say, please go to those websites like Stop Rearm Europe, or also and Michel mentioned it already several times, go also to the No to War, to www.no.to.nato.org website, where there is also a manifesto. You're invited, if you're belonging to an organization, to sign it. We want to have a wide signature, many signatures on that manifesto, under that manifesto. It's one of the, let's say, endeavors we try to do in connecting the peace organizations in opposing militarism, and connecting also this to the whole issues of social impact of militarization. So thank you very much. As I said, this webinar will be recorded and will be distributed to our channels. There is a Facebook page of No to War, No to NATO. I think it will also be on the International Peace Bureau website or social media. So just Google around and you will find it, I think. Thank you very much for your participation, and hope to see you soon back in another discussion.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.